Thank you for joining us for this episode of Into the Killing. As always, we welcome your input. If you know of any cold cases that were eventually solved, please visit our website, crimlisted.com, and navigate to the suggested case page. On that same page, you can also propose cases for our other channels, Criminally Listed and Paranormally Listed. Sometimes we come across intriguing cases that lack enough information for a full episode, so we choose to explore two such stories in this double feature. Our first case takes us back to August of 1985. On August 11th, the Broadway musical Dreamgirls closed at the Imperial Theater in New York City after a remarkable 1,522 performances. The show had premiered on December 20th of the previous year. Dreamgirls centered on an R&B trio originally called the Dreamettes, later known simply as the Dreams. The storyline chronicled their struggles and successes within the vibrant music scene of the 60s and 70s. The musical's soundtrack was a tremendous hit, earning 14 Tony Award nominations and securing 6 wins, including awards for Best Book and Best Choreography. In 2006, the production was adapted into a major motion picture starring Beyoncé, Jamie Foxx, Jennifer Hudson, and Eddie Murphy. That film received 8 Oscar nominations, with Jennifer Hudson winning for Best Supporting Actress, and the movie also claiming the award for Best Sound Mixing. On August 9th, 1985, Pee-wee's Big Adventure premiered in theaters. The character Pee Wee Herman was created and portrayed by Paul Reubens, who developed him in 1977 during his time with the improv troupe The Groundlings. Reubens launched the Pee Wee Herman Show in Los Angeles in 1980, which gained massive popularity and was subsequently filmed by HBO. This success led Reubens to develop a feature film for Warner Brothers, co-writing the script alongside Phil Hartman and Michael Varl. Hartman, also a Groundlings alumnus, enjoyed a successful career as a comedian and actor. Tragically, Hartman was murdered by his wife in May of 1998 at age 49. The film's director was a first-timer with major projects, but the movie's success, earning over $40 million on a $7 million budget, cemented Reubens' reputation. He went on to star in 2 more Pee Wee Herman movies and a TV series that aired on CBS from 1986 to 1991. The combination of Pee Wee's Big Adventure and the comedy Beetlejuice, released in 1988, helped establish Tim Burton as a major director, leading to the blockbuster Batman in 1989. Burton has since directed scores of films, many critically acclaimed and commercially successful. Paul Reubens continued embodying Pee Wee Herman until his death from cancer at the age of 70 in 2023. Meanwhile, on August 1st, 1985, notorious serial killer Richard Ramirez, known as the Night Stalker, was arrested in Los Angeles. Ramirez was linked to 13 murders committed over the preceding 14 months. Law enforcement identified him after his fingerprint was discovered in a stolen car he had used as a getaway vehicle during his last murder. When his mugshot was released to the public, the police intensified their efforts to apprehend him, leading to his swift capture. Richard Ramirez had recently returned to Los Angeles on August 31st after traveling out of state. Upon arrival, he was recognized by locals and attempted to steal a car, but a crowd of citizens quickly surrounded him. They beat him until police arrived and arrested him. In 1989, Ramirez was convicted of 13 murders and sentenced to death. For more details about his crimes, there is a dedicated episode titled The Power of Love by Huey Lewis of the News. Meanwhile, in August of 1985, a song named The Power of Love topped the Billboard charts. It was part of the soundtrack for the film that held the #1 spot in theaters that day, connecting the music and movie industries in that summer's cultural landscape. In the summer of 1985, a young boy named David Reid, 13 years old, lived in Skull Hill Haven, Pennsylvania. Located about 130 miles west of New York City and 90 miles north of Philadelphia, the town had roughly 5,700 residents. David was the youngest of 5 siblings. His father had died when he was just 13 months old, and a year earlier, in August 1984, his older brother Ronald had passed away after falling ill. From childhood, David dreamed of becoming a pilot and always wanted to fly. That year, he worked as a paperboy for the local newspaper. On the afternoon of August 21st, 1985, David set off from his home on his bicycle. The weather was pleasant, clear skies, temperatures in the mid-70s. As he hadn't returned by dinner time, his mother Joan grew worried, especially because David had juvenile diabetes, which required him to eat regularly. She, along with his brothers, searched for him but found nothing. As evening fell, panic set in and she called the police. An immediate search was launched. The officers questioned his family, who assured them David wouldn't have run away. He got along well at home and had no reason to leave. The next day, David's sister Virginia, aged 26, discovered his bicycle abandoned among bushes near the railroad tracks close to their house. This deeply alarmed the family, who knew how much David loved his bike and often used it for errands and adventures. The family was devastated by his disappearance. Losing a loved one is tragic under any circumstances, but in David's case, the timing was especially painful, as it was just 6 days before the first anniversary of his brother Ronald's death. The police continued investigating, learning that David might have been planning to visit the railroad tracks to meet 2 acquaintances. Both persons were questioned but claimed not to have seen him that day. Rumors also suggested David attended a house party, but efforts to verify this failed. No one recalled seeing him there. The family persisted, distributing flyers around town and searching tirelessly. Despite their efforts, no clues surfaced for nearly 4 months. Then, on December 15, 1985, police received a strange call from a local resident. When they arrived at the man's home, they found on his kitchen table a human skull. The man explained he had been searching for his belongings but provided little detail beyond that. The case of young David Reid remained unresolved, a tragic mystery that haunted the community. While exploring a wooded area behind his house, a man and his dog uncovered a human skull, which the dog eagerly brought to him. Recognizing the significance, the man decided to take the skull home and notify the authorities. He then led police to the site where the skull had been found, approximately half a mile from where David's bicycle had been discovered. Investigators soon uncovered additional human bones nearby, partially buried beneath leaves and foliage. Among the evidence was a piece of clothing, a shirt matching the description of what 13-year-old David Reid was wearing when he mysteriously disappeared. Dental records confirmed that the remains belonged to David, providing undeniable identification. Shortly afterward, another man approached the police, claiming he also had bones, specifically part of David's jawbone, His property bordered the wooded area, and like the first man, he initially believed the bones to be animal remains, which he kept in a bucket outside his home. However, a forensic pathologist examined the remains and confirmed they were indeed David's. An autopsy revealed unsettling details that shocked many. The doctors suspected David had died from complications related to juvenile diabetes. Despite this, investigators remained unconvinced that his death was purely natural. An anthropologist scrutinized the bones, noting large fractures in the back of David's skull, a possible sign of foul play. Yet, such injuries might also result from an accident or a fall caused by illness, leaving the cause of death officially classified as undetermined. After the remains were recovered, a funeral service was held for David. Yet, many attendees found it disturbing that a boy of such size, just 13, had been reduced to only bones. As a result, his remains were buried in a small coffin designed for infants. The case's ambiguity persisted, casting a shadow over the community. In the midst of this mystery, the story was briefly interrupted for promotion. An author's thriller, praised by Stephen King, was highlighted, featuring a storyline about Ellie Black's unexpected return, a character driven by suspense and mystery. This novel, described as a clever blend of character study and plot twists, captivated readers with its gripping narrative. Back in the investigation, David's older sister Virginia tirelessly pushed to have the case reopened, but authorities insisted the evidence was insufficient for further inquiry. The undetermined verdict persisted, and no criminal charges were filed, leaving many to accept that David's death might have been accidental or natural. The unresolved nature of the case deeply affected his mother, Joan, who began drinking more heavily and eventually died from liver disease in June of 2000. David's death continued to haunt the family and community, a tragic mystery that remained unsolved. In June 2005, after years of persistent effort, Virginia finally saw her brother's case reopened, sparking fresh hope. Over the previous 2 decades, society and culture had evolved significantly. For instance, major Hollywood releases in 1985 included The Breakfast Club, The Goonies, and Teen Wolf. Fast forward 20 years to 1985 again, and cinematic hits like Tim Burton's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Brokeback Mountain, and Hitch hit theaters. The Grammy Awards, held every February, celebrate outstanding musical achievements from the prior year. At the 1986 ceremony, the charity single, We Are the World, credited to USA for Africa, won both Record and Song of the Year. Phil Collins's No Jacket Required took home the award for Album of the Year. A decade later, at the 2006 Grammys, rock bands left a mark. Green Day's Boulevard of Broken Dreams was named Record of the Year, while U2's How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb won Album of the Year, and their song, Sometimes You Can't Make It on Your Own, was recognized as Song of the Year. Television in the mid-1980s introduced popular series such as The Golden Girls, Growing Pains, and She-Ra, Princess of Power in 1985. By 1995, notable shows like Everybody Loves Raymond, Philadelphia, Criminal Minds, and Deadliest Catch debuted to devoted audiences. Literature also saw remarkable releases in 1985, including Brené Brown's debut novel, Lesson Zero, Jonathan Kellerman's first thriller, When the Bow Breaks, and the beloved holiday classic The Polar Express, by Chris Van Allsburg. A decade later, influential books such as The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak, Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, and Marley and Me by John Grogan captured readers' hearts. In 2505, the reopening of David's case brought renewed hope to his sister Virginia, who believed her brother's death might finally be unraveled. When detectives examined the case files, an element that immediately drew their attention was the location where David's body was discovered. It was a place where children rarely played, raising questions. Why was David there? Had he died elsewhere and his body dumped? Moreover, the partial burial of his remains suggested foul play, not an accidental death. The lead detective suspected murder. One potential suspect, a man convicted of child sexual abuse, had a solid alibi. He was incarcerated at the time of David's death. To generate new leads, the police went public with the case, and Virginia was encouraged to speak with the media, hoping this would jog memories or inspire a previously silent witness to come forward. During interviews with those who knew David, some mentioned a man named Joe Geyer, whose behavior changed drastically after David's death. Geyer became exceedingly reclusive. Interestingly, after the remains were found, a man named Joe Geyer came forward, claiming his dog had collected bones from the wooded area where David's body was discovered. Geyer even gave an interview on local television about finding the bones. At the time of David's death, Geyer was a 20-year-old small-time marijuana dealer in town. Though never considered a suspect initially, his strange behavior and the timing raised questions about his possible involvement. In a wooded area behind his home, where David's body was later discovered, detectives reopened the investigation. Initially, Geyer claimed he had only met David once. However, when detectives pressed him with rumors swirling around town suggesting his involvement, Geyer finally admitted he had been present when David died. He insisted, though, that he was not the one responsible. Instead, he pointed to 14-year-old John Fry, a friend of David, asserting that the three had been drinking and smoking marijuana together. According to Geyer, Fry punched David, causing him to fall, hit his head, and eventually die. Fryer provided a similar account, but shifted blame onto Geyer, claiming that it was Geyer who delivered the punch. Fry said they were drinking and smoking behind an abandoned caboose when Geyer accused David of stealing his marijuana plants. Fry admitted that Geyer punched David, who then fell onto the railroad tracks, hitting his head and losing consciousness yet remaining alive initially. Fry claimed that Geyer told him to leave and assured him he would handle it. Out of fear of the 20-year-old Geyer, Fry obeyed and only learned of David's death months later when his remains were discovered. He explained that his silence stemmed from ongoing fear of Geyer, which kept him from coming forward. In an effort to clarify the truth, authorities exhumed David's remains nearly 21 and a half years after his death to gather new evidence. In January 2007, an expert anthropologist examined the bones. She observed fine fractures on David's left cheek, determining that he had been punched forcefully enough to cause him to fall and crack his skull. As a result, the cause of death was reclassified from undetermined to homicide due to blunt force trauma. The police then set out to identify whether Geyer or Fry was responsible. Notably, the fractures were on the left side of David's face, suggesting a punch from a left-handed attacker. Fry was right-handed. Geyer, at 20 years old, was left-handed. At the time of David's death, Geyer was angry over someone stealing his marijuana plants, providing him with a motive for assault. In contrast, Fry lacked a clear reason to hurt David. Based on these clues, investigators concluded that Geyer was likely the one who killed David. On the 23rd anniversary of David's death, in August 2008, 39-year-old Geyer was arrested and charged with third-degree murder, voluntary manslaughter, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with evidence. David was a passionate advocate and the driving force behind efforts to reopen his case. Tragically, his sister Virginia, who had passed away 19 days before his remains were exhumed, did not live to witness the arrest. Virginia died in January 2007 at the age of 47. Her family recalled that she had turned to drugs as a way to cope with her grief. The district attorney's office faced significant challenges, as their case against Joe Geyer lacked concrete physical evidence and relied heavily on a single witness, John Fry. If the jury doubted Fry's testimony, Geyer could be acquitted, and the possibility of future prosecution would vanish. To avoid this, Geyer was offered a plea deal. The third-degree murder charge would be dropped, and he could plead guilty to involuntary manslaughter. In exchange, he received a sentence of 1 or 2 years in prison and agreed to cooperate with police by recounting the events of the day David was killed. His confession differed slightly from the initial accounts he and Fry had given police. Geyer stated that he believed David was stealing his marijuana plants, prompting him and Fry to search for him. They found David at the Caboose, a local hangout. Geyer claimed he accused David of theft, then punched him in the face, causing him to fall onto the railway track. David was still conscious after hitting his head, but Geyer admitted he panicked. He and Fry then went downtown, leaving David behind. Geyer later returned, hoping David had woken up, but found him still lying in the same spot, apparently dead. Geyer said he then dragged David's body into nearby woods and covered him with leaves and foliage, an act that, if remedied sooner, might have saved David's life. In February 2009, Geyer was sentenced to 1 or 2 years in prison, with credit for time served, allowing for his release as early as August that year. David Reid's family felt disappointed that Geyer's sentence was so short, yet they found some closure in finally seeing the case resolved after 23 years. As part of his plea deal, Geyer was also ordered to pay for David's reburial. According to Geyer's Facebook profile, since 2018, he had been working as a forklift operator. Before moving on to the next part of this story, let's hear a word from our sponsor. Miracle-Made sleep solutions can greatly influence your quality of rest, especially through temperature regulation. Many people wake up feeling too hot or cold. I used to wake multiple times each night because I was too hot. That all changed when I began using Miracle-Made's bed sheets. Inspired by NASA technology, these sheets contain silver-infused fabrics that actively regulate temperature, keeping you perfectly comfortable throughout the night. I honestly can't remember the last time I slept so well, and I now plan to be a lifelong user of Miracle bed sheets. If I had to rank my preferences, a good, cool night's sleep would be on the far end of likes, while laundry would be on the far end of dislikes. Luckily, Miracle-Made's sheets are made with materials infused with silver, which can prevent up to 99% of bacteria and help keep your bedding fresh longer. Approximately 7% of bacteria in sheets cause them to stay cleaner and fresher 3 times longer than conventional bedding, resulting in less frequent laundry Sleeping on bacteria-laden bedding can harm your skin by clogging pores, leading to breakouts and acne. Miracle-Made sheets are designed to be both comfortable and resistant to bacterial growth, protecting your skin during restful sleep. What truly stood out to me was their affordability. Despite their high-quality construction, these sheets are reasonably priced. I've often spent more on less comfortable, poorly designed sheets. This is an ideal moment to explore these sheets, as a special offer is currently available. They are promisingly crafted to ensure comfort and hygiene, making them worth a closer look. For those interested, there's a substantial discount, over 40%, on orders placed today. Plus, by applying a promotional code at checkout, you'll receive 3 complimentary towels and an additional 20% savings. Miracle-Made confidently backs their product with a 30-day money-back guarantee. If satisfaction isn't absolute, a full refund is assured, emphasizing their trust in quality. Elevate your sleep experience by visiting their website, where you can claim the exclusive offer and enjoy significant savings, along with the bonus towels. Switching gears to a different story, let's recall an event from September of 1977. On the first day of that month, Renee Richards, at the age of 43, played her inaugural women's singles match at a major tennis tournament. Facing Virginia Wade, the reigning Wimbledon champion for over a year, Richards, a player born male, had fought earnestly to compete in women's tennis. Having undergone gender reassignment surgery in 1975, she faced regulatory hurdles. In 1976, she was subjected to genetic testing mandated by tennis authorities, which she refused. As a result, she was banned from Wimbledon and the Italian Open. In legal battles that followed, Richards challenged these rules, claiming they constituted gender discrimination. The United States Tennis Association, the Women's Tennis Association, and the U.S. Open Committee had created policies requiring female players to verify their sex genetically. A New York court ruled in her favor in August of 1977, affirming her status as female and condemning the rule as discriminatory. Her debut at the U.S. Open drew widespread media attention, although her performance was disappointing. According to the Washington Post, Virginia Wade overwhelmed Richards with aggressive strokes, and Richards lacked the agility to resist Wade's attacks, losing in straight sets, 6-1, 6-4. Nonetheless, Richards advanced to the doubles final, a notable achievement. Her case became a landmark moment for transgender rights in sports. Following her legal victory, Richards emerged not only as a trailblazer, but also as an activist advocating for transgender athletes. Her pioneering efforts contributed significantly to the ongoing dialogue surrounding gender and sports equality. The last execution carried out with the guillotine marks a significant moment in history. Introduced during the French Revolution, the guillotine was regarded as a more humane method of execution compared to the brutal older punishments, such as the breaking wheel. The wheel was used to crush victims' limbs by spinning them and striking their bones with a bar, often resulting in a prolonged and agonizing death over days, with the execution sometimes ending only after delivering a final, fatal blow to the neck or chest, the so-called coup de grace or mercy blow. Historically, the breaking wheel was prevalent in ancient Rome, but in Europe, beheading had traditionally been reserved for noble criminals. The French physician and politician Joseph Ignace Guillotin opposed capital punishment yet supported the idea that executions should be swift and painless. His advocacy led to the enactment of a law in March of 1792, mandating the use of an execution machine that would decapitate without undue suffering. The first person to be executed by this method was the highwayman Nicolas Pellier on April 25th that year. Although the device bears guillotine's name, he did not invent it. The guillotine was developed by a humanist and instrument maker named Toby Schmid, along with Antoine Louis, the king's physician. The device remained France's primary method of capital punishment for approximately 185 years. In July of 1973, a tragic case captured public attention. Elizabeth Boussad, aged 21, reported her boyfriend, Hamida Dean Duby, attempting to force her into sex work. Born in Tunisia, Shadou moved to Marseille in 1968. After his arrest and brief release, he recruited 2 women and forced them into prostitution. On July 3, 1974, Shadou abducted one of his victims, Pequod, and subjected her to horrific violence, beating her severely and burning her breasts and genitals with lit cigarettes. He then drove her to a remote area and strangled her to death. Apprehended and convicted, Shadou was sentenced to execution in September of 1977, and he was beheaded by guillotine in what was the last legally sanctioned decapitation in the Western world. Witnesses reported his responsiveness for about 30 seconds after decapitation. This event marked the end of government-approved beheading in the West. Today, while the guillotine is no longer used for executions in most countries, beheading remains an official method in some nations, such as Saudi Arabia, where a sword is employed instead of a machine. France abolished the death penalty altogether in 1981. On September 20th of 1977, the episode titled Hollywood Part 3 of the popular ABC sitcom Happy Days aired, capturing an estimated 30 million viewers. In this episode, the character Arthur Fonzarelli, Fonzie or the Fonz, accepts a challenge to jump over a shark on water skis. Over time, this episode has gained notoriety as symbolizing the decline of the show's quality, as its plot growth stagnated and absurd events were added to attract viewers. By 1985, the phrase "jumping the shark" was coined, symbolizing the point at which a television series begins to decline creatively. The term was popularized in 1997 when John Hinn launched a website named Jump the Shark, marking a cultural milestone in television history. In 1977, the cultural landscape was thriving with iconic music, movies, and television shows. The top singles included Tonight's the Night by Rod Stewart, I Just Want to Be Your Everything by Andy Gibb, and The Best of My Love by The Emotions. Cinematic hits such as Saturday Night Fever, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and Eraserhead captivated audiences, while the decade's blockbuster, Star Wars, dominated the box office during the night of September 23rd. Meanwhile, television introduced groundbreaking series like Chips, Logan's Run, and Soap. The latter garnered controversy for its daring portrayal of themes such as sexuality and adultery, sparking protests from religious groups. Despite this opposition, the network ABC refused to back down and aired the show with a viewer discretion warning. Soap defied conventions, becoming a huge success by running for 4 seasons. In the midst of this vibrant pop culture era, a tragic story unfolded. On the night of September 23, 1977, Doris A.R., a 30-year-old woman married with 2 children, aged 13 and 10, went out to a Midland County bar in Michigan with friends. She worked as a union steward at Tried Plastics and remained at the bar until it closed early the next morning. Her husband believed she was staying with friends, so he felt no immediate concern when she didn't return home that night. However, as hours passed without contact, worry set in, leading him to report her missing the following morning. Over 10 days later, on October 7th, Doris's body was discovered in a wooded area. She had been raped and strangled, her life violently taken. Authorities quickly considered her husband, John, as a suspect. He underwent a polygraph test, which he passed, ruling him out at first. Investigators interviewed witnesses who had seen Doris arguing with a man in the bar shortly before closing, but no arrests followed, and the case eventually went cold. By 1993, police announced they had a suspect, yet lacked sufficient evidence for an indictment. It wasn't until 2007 that new developments emerged when a phone call reinvigorated the investigation, triggering renewed efforts after nearly 30 years. The case remains unresolved, with each passing year reminding us of the enduring challenge of seeking justice. Reflecting on the era's innovations, 1977 also saw the debut of inventions like the Chipad, the Atari 268, and Post-it notes shaping everyday life. Fast forward 30 years to 2007, a new technology emerged. The Amazon Kindle, iPod Touch, and ToothTunes toothbrushes, transforming how people read, listen to music, and brush their teeth. The world of snacks and beverages in 1977 featured cookies, cereals, Publicious gum, and Billy beer, an amusing addition to the cultural tapestry of the time. By 2007, popular drinks included Galaxy globally and Snapple's extensive range, demonstrating shifts in consumer preferences. From television shows to significant technological and cultural changes, both years mark pivotal moments in history, with the mysteries of unresolved crimes and innovations shaping the fabric of society. Robert Lee Hager, born in 1950 in Michigan, grew up in the rural town of Isabella County before moving to the small village of Rosebush after his mother remarried. Rather than completing high school, he enlisted in the Army in 1968, training as a sharpshooter. His military service took him first to Germany, then to Vietnam, but his tour was unusually brief, a fact that puzzled journalists. Despite claims of injury, no records confirmed this. Upon returning to Rosebush, Hager worked on farms, sold livestock feed, and served as an auctioneer at the local stockyards. Known for heavy drinking and womanizing, he frequented local bars, earning a reputation as a hard-drinking misdemeanant. In early June 1974, just a day before his 24th birthday, Hager attended a wedding reception. That night, he gave a 14-year-old girl a ride home in his truck, leading to sexual activity. He was charged with rape, but pleaded guilty to making out and touching her genitals, as both had been drinking. He received 3 years probation and a fine of $500. Months later, he faced another charge of sexual assault and violations of his probation, alcohol-related infractions, and missed payments. Since the assault case was difficult to prosecute, Hager was ultimately convicted in May 1974 of violating probation and sentenced to 2 to 10 years in prison. While incarcerated, Hager honed his skills in chess and developed an interest in bodybuilding. Upon release in June 1977, he moved back with his parents, resumed heavy drinking, and became increasingly aggressive. That summer, he met 19-year-old Getta Ronning, known as Netta, a waitress from Loomis, Michigan. Their relationship began shortly after they started dating, and soon Netta became pregnant. During her pregnancy, Doris Carter was murdered in her home, and a man seen arguing with her, Robert Hager, became a person of interest. Authorities questioned Hager, but never formally charged him in Doris's killing. Meanwhile, Netta later terminated her pregnancy with an abortion. After a tumultuous relationship, he and Netta parted ways, only to reunite 2 years later. Haggard moved into her mobile home, and they soon became engaged. Despite their plans, her family strongly disapproved of the marriage. On February 28, 1981, the couple officially wed. Throughout this time, Haggard continued to frequent local bars, often forcing Netta to stay at home. Soon after tying the knot, financial troubles emerged. Haggard's reckless spending and inconsistent work ethic strained their situation. He had always aspired to be a livestock auctioneer and managed to find some employment in that field, but stability eluded him. Desperation led them to write checks they knew would bounce, and eventually, Haggard's mother stepped in to support them financially. The situation worsened when Haggard became physically abusive toward Netta. In June of 1981, he wrote a bad check that prompted police investigations. Around this time, her mother announced she would no longer assist financially and planned to stay with Haggard. Weeks after his check-writing spree, Haggard gathered what money he could find and fled the area. On June 23, 1981, Netta filed for divorce and moved to Florida, seeking a fresh start. Meanwhile, Haggard settled in Halestown, Tennessee. A warrant was issued for his arrest in Michigan related to the bad check. The divorce hearing was scheduled for February 17, 1982. On Valentine's Day, she returned to Michigan, staying at her parents' home in Farwell, a small town with just over 800 residents. The day before the hearing, her family planned a modest gathering to celebrate her return. Haggard was not expected to appear, especially since the warrant for his arrest remained active. As evening approached, around 6:30, events were set to unfold. Alice Russell's sister and her family arrived at the home, expecting to find her sister Helen, GNE, and her 4 children there. When her father, George, called about half an hour earlier, Alice overheard Helen's voice in the background, seemingly disciplining her children. At the moment of their arrival, Helen's truck was parked outside, but the house was eerily dark inside. Upon entering, they initially mistook 2 figures on the kitchen floor for coats, but as they flipped on the lights, horror struck. They discovered the lifeless bodies of 23-year-old Netta and her 42-year-old mother, Vree. Terrified, Alice and her family fled the scene, seeking refuge at a neighbor's home. Soon after, law enforcement arrived and uncovered additional victims. Helen Gaffney's body in her truck, along with her children, Angela, age 10, Tom, 8, Amy, 7, and baby Amanda, just 15 months old. Remarkably, Amanda was still alive on the truck floor, suffering a head injury that caused only a bump. In the house's basement near the staircase, the police found Netta's stepfather, George Post, also dead. Every victim had been shot. Netta, George, and Vree in the house with a shotgun aimed at their chests, while Helen was shot in the chest as well. Tom had pellets from the shotgun lodged in his neck, and Angela and Amy were both shot in the forehead with a .38 caliber handgun. Piecing together the evidence, authorities reconstructed the tragic sequence of events. They believed George was present in the basement when he was killed first. Helen had managed to shepherd her children into the truck and was attempting to drive away when the killer appeared in front of her. Before she could leave, he shot her through the windshield with a shotgun, wounding 8-year-old Tom in the neck with pellets. Then, using the same .38 caliber handgun, he shot 10-year-old Angela and 7-year-old Amy in the head. In her desperate effort to save Amanda, Helen knocked her toddler to the ground, which explains the bump on her head. The killer then covered the blood-stained ground in snow, waited inside the house, and when Nada and Ray arrived home, shot them in the chest. The police quickly deduced that Nada and Ray had been the intended targets, as their presence posed too great a risk for the killer to wait longer after striking the other family members. Fearing detection, he left the scene shortly thereafter in Bree's white and blue pickup truck and fled. Authorities conducted interviews with friends and family members to uncover potential motives or enemies. Among them, Robert Hager's name repeatedly surfaced. Hager, who shared a residence with a roommate in Haletown, Tennessee, had read about the murders and noted that the suspect was driving a white and blue Chevrolet Silverado. Recognizing the vehicle, police put out a description, set up a roadblock, and soon intercepted Hager, who was then taken into custody. In a parked car, police discovered a fully loaded .38 caliber handgun. Haggard's apartment was searched, revealing blood-stained clothing. 13 days after the murders, investigators also recovered a shotgun from beneath a couch at the crime scene, which was later identified as George's firearm. 32-year-old Robert Haggard went to trial in September of 1982. Although the prosecution lacked direct evidence like fingerprints linking Haggard to the crime scene or weapons, they presented circumstantial evidence pointing to his involvement. Authorities traced Haggard's movements by finding witnesses who saw him on buses traveling from Hale-Tuone to Farwell. Additionally, 3 residents living about half a mile from the crime scene knew the victims and Haggard, and they reported passing the property around the time of the murders, seeing Haggard near Helen Gaffney's truck. Ballistic tests confirmed that the .38 caliber handgun found in Baud's car, driven by Haggard at the time of arrest, was used in the killings. Blood on the clothes in Haggard's apartment exhibited unusual features, consistent with one of the victims. During his trial, Haggard's defense call was silent. He presented no witnesses nor evidence. His lawyer argued that the prosecution failed to establish Haggard's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. He claimed that Haggard, upon discovering the murdered families at their home, became distressed, grabbed a .38 caliber handgun, and drove away, but there was no proof he intentionally committed the murders. After 7.5 hours of jury deliberation, Robert Haggard was convicted on 6 of 7 counts of first-degree murder. He received additional conviction for second-degree murder of 7-year-old Tom Gaffney, though the jury was uncertain if Haggard's intent was to kill the boy. They concluded Tom's death was a tragic consequence of Haggard's assault on his mother. Haggard was sentenced to 7 consecutive life terms, plus 32 more years behind bars. The so-called Rock Road Massacre ranks as Michigan's 3rd worst mass murder in history. The worst occurred in 1927 at the Bath School disaster, where 45 lives, including the perpetrators, were lost. the Hazelwood Massacre of 1971, claiming 8 lives, ranks second. That case is featured in our YouTube series, Criminently. In 2007, after receiving an alert from a journalist, police reopened Doris A.R.'s cold case. Advances in DNA analysis allowed investigators to compare Robert Haggard's DNA with evidence from the crime scene. In July of 2009, 32 years after Doris's murder, authorities announced Haggard as the killer, though he was never formally charged, as he had died 6 years earlier of natural causes while incarcerated. He passed away in November of 2003 at the age of 53. Though it took over 3 decades to resolve, Doris's family felt relief upon finally knowing the truth. That concludes today's session. Thank you sincerely for your attention. Please prioritize your safety and well-being while taking care of yourself.